We are live on Facebook, and we have been planning this day for a long time, and I want to acknowledge that we are experiencing a blackout on social media, and we are here with a very wonderful conversation with Giovanni Gonzalez. And thank you to all of our guests. Thank you for everyone who is here. Thank you for everyone who is watching. And thank you to all of you who will be watching in the near future. I'm going to introduce Giovanni, but before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about how Connect and Create came to be and why I have this platform to share with you. I was actually inspired by Giovanni Gonzalez and his business partner, Sorel, by their program that they created 56 business days ago, called the Daily Huddle. And out of my inspiration for what they created inside of the pandemic of creating a space for people to come together and to share and learn and be inspired and start their day, I chose to create my own format. I was so excited. I kept inviting everyone I knew to be speakers. And I was even a speaker on their Daily Huddle. And out of that excitement and interest, I chose to create a platform myself. And that is Connect and Create. And so we are at episode 16. And Giovanni, before I give you a formal introduction, is there anything that you would like to share with our guests here in our live studio and across the world?
Thank you, Karina. I just want to thank you for inviting me to Connect and Create. I've been a fan of you a long time, so I love the opportunity of creating these conversations.
Excellent, excellent. Well, before we go any further, I want to I am going to share a little bit about Giovanni. Now, I could go on and on and on because Giovanni happens to be one of my favorite human beings in the world. So I will formally introduce Giovanni. Giovanni comes to us from Colombia. He was born in Colombia, he lived in Brazil, and he currently resides in Atlanta, Georgia. As a first-time immigrant, Giovanni sold newspapers on traffic lights for a living. And now, professionally, he is the founder of and chief executive officer of Mindful Performance Blueprint, otherwise known as MPB, and the creator of Access the Leader Within leadership courses. MPB is a boutique consulting company committed to elevating the performance of individuals and organizations through the transformation of culture, leadership, development, and the implementation of strategic leadership initiatives. Those are some great words. Tough to put all together, but great words, and you think about what they mean. With over 12 years of experience, Giovanni has proven the ability to produce leadership at all levels of an organization and has trained thousands of business professionals in North Africa, North America, the Caribbean, and Latin America. Giovanni has a bachelor's degree in international affairs and a concentration in international business and a master's in the science of management and leadership. Anecdotes of Giovanni's life and his personal transformation have been published in his book, La Mente, did I pronounce that correctly? La Mente da un Immigrante. The mind, I want to put a French accent to it because that's my my language. Très bien, très bien. The Mind of the Immigrant, 2011. And his life story was aired on Telemundo under the title of Breaking Barriers. Furthermore, he is frequently invited to speak as a business expert on the weekly program Connexion from Univision. So that's a little bit professionally about my dear friend, Giovanni Gonzalez. So without further ado, Giovanni, I give you the floor. And if you could, please share with us what you will. And I know that we will be dancing in the conversation today, and I look forward to our conversation. And we will have time at the end for those of you that are in our audience to participate with any questions or comments. Thank you, Giovanni.
Corina, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to have the opportunity to connect with you and create with you and create with all of you who are on the virtual studio live. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate the opportunity of connecting with you at this lunch hour. I hope that if you are on a lunchtime, I hope that you're enjoying your lunch. And today, one of the questions that we're going to be taking on is this aspect of leadership in the context of the difference between leading myself and leading others. And leadership is a big word. It's like a word like love. Everybody has something to say about love, and everybody's opinion about love is right, right? And everybody has some self-expression about love and how to deal with it. And 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 in some way, it's difficult to just kind of put it in one sentence and then everybody align to it, right? And leadership is a kind of like that. Everybody has an opinion about leadership, and anybody's opinion about leadership or way of looking at leadership is right. It's they have collected evidence around that. And so for me, when I look at leadership, I really look at what people do on an everyday basis. Everything requires some kind of leadership. Either I'm leading myself for a particular goal, or I'm leading others, right? And it's not just about leading others in the sense of work. It's also a family. I have 2 children, so I'm leading in some way or another every single day. If I need them to brush their teeth or take a shower, right, or eat at a particular time, or have a particular downtime, whatever that is, whatever perspective I'm bringing in the context of railing my children in some way or another, it requires leadership. Or if I am talking to myself about how I'm reinventing myself in this new era after the COVID-19, there's a virtual world that I'm leading myself now in the context of how to reinvent myself in a new way. I'm leading myself, and also I get to have clients, and these clients have 100, 200, thousands of employees. So how to lead them, right? How to lead others, how to create a conversation where people align. And that's all in the context of leadership. So for simplicity sake, I want to say that leadership is about moving the ball forward. It's about going to a particular direction with other people for a particular outcome, right? And so I wanted to create that aspect or that context in the background for leadership. And I want to also start with sharing a little bit of my journey as an entrepreneur to begin to separate for me something that's really critical, which is the difference between leading myself and leading others, or how you lead yourself and how to lead others. So when I moved, by the way, Corina, I didn't live in Brazil. That would have been really cool. But it was Belize. I lived in Belize for a while, which is just as cool, but I haven't had a chance to go to Brazil yet. So when I came to this country, I came from Belize. I lived in Belize for a while. And as I moved in this country, it was as a result of a love story, if you will. I wasn't really necessarily looking to move to America. I was just kind of following my heart. I was 18, 19 years old. And the love story wasn't going the right way. It wasn't really working out. So I ended up having to stay in Florida. And it was the first time that I really got to really begin to ask myself this question of how to survive, how to pay for my stuff, how to create value in the marketplace. Now, I never saw it as creating value in the marketplace. I saw it as, how do I get a job? How do I make money, right? And so, like, the journey went about and life started coming about, and I got into a lot of habits that didn't really serve me, and then some good habits, and just life was starting to happen. But I had a question in mind that I think a lot of people have in mind, which is, how do I create a life for myself that really works? Or how do I create a life that I really like? And I started noticing that, or not noticing, but I started adopting a kind of a victim kind of mentality, if you will. And I started adopting it, and I didn't really realize that I was adopting it. And what I mean by that is, I will take on whatever was there as an opportunity. So if I would get a job offer in a particular industry, I'll just go and see if they could hire me. Or however it was like that, whatever opened up in my life, that was kind of the opportunity that I would take. And I sort of like, in some way felt like a victim of life. Like, well, I'm doing this because I have to. Don't you know? I have to pay my bills, or I have to deal with this. Until I met someone who not only had a good ethics in the context of working hard for what they wanted, but they also had this creative spirit around creating their life. Like, it wasn't just about living, it was about creating my life. It was about creating their life. And then they asked me this question, like, are you living the life that you created? Or are you living a life where you're kind of victim of the circumstances? And I was very clear I was living a life as a victim of the circumstances. I was working in restaurants, I was a hardworking human being, but I wasn't living the life I wanted to live. And so I started leading myself out of a victim of circumstances kind of thing towards a created kind of life. And I noticed that I started to learn how to lead myself, how to lead me. And I started to learn how to do that. And there are some basic principles about that. For example, and I know all of you who are in this audience, I know you have them in you, like, set up a goal for yourself, right? So I got introduced this aspect of goal setting. So I would start the year and I would say, this is what I want for the rest of the year. This is what I want to create for myself. And I would write them down and I would put a poster on the wall and I would kind of see that goal, and I wouldn't worry about whether I could achieve it, whether I believed I could do it. No, I just kind of set a goal there and I let it be there. And all of a sudden I started realizing that the brain would start to look for opportunities towards the goal that I had. And I just kind of like took that on, that was a way in which I was leading myself. And then I started meeting people that would recommend me certain books, like The Alchemist. I know some of you have read it. And if you haven't read that book, it's a really beautiful book to start a personal transformation, a personal development journey. It's a beautiful book called The Alchemist. And The Alchemist talks about that when you want something, the world conspires for you to have it. Now, I didn't really believe that. That was too romantic for me. I was mostly realistic in nature. So I didn't really believe it, but I started noticing that life was happening around the goals that I was setting. And so I had this other aspect about myself in which I was leading myself, which was being very persistent and really determined. And I will continue working and I will continue working and I will not let go of the bone, right? That's kind of the way that I learned to lead myself. I saw miracles happening by not letting go of the goal, by not letting go of that bone. And so all of that is in the world of leading myself. So as I'm sharing this, I hope that you can see how you lead yourself. Like, you have a way of leading yourself. You have a way of that you get results, right? And that's all in the context of leading yourself. And it's very useful. So as I started, leading myself, getting results for myself, then it became about, as I was growing professionally, and then it became about, it's not just about me. If I wanted to create something that I was inspired about, I needed to create a team around me. And so at the beginning, I would lead others the way I learned to lead myself. So whatever internal dialogue I had for myself to make the work done, that's kind of like it became the external dialogue with other people. I would tell them, well, you got to do this, and then you got to do that, and you got to be persistent. And it was this kind of like that external dialogue to the way my internal dialogue was. And whatever judgment I had about myself, however I would judge myself to get the job done, like if I would tell myself, well, you're being lazy, you're a procrastinator, whatever I would use, whatever language I would use to trigger action on myself, I would use it with other people. So in some cases, a little more sensitive, right? But it will be around the same thing. And I started noticing that it wasn't working. And then I started noticing that I started judging people. But I wasn't trying to judge people. It's just that the strategies I knew that would work for me, they should know that it works, that also it would work for them. And so I found myself judging people, and I found myself saying things like, well, I just haven't met the right people. I just like, I know this, like, people are stupid and they're just not committed and they just give up easily. People just give up. And I had this like judgment around how people should be and they shouldn't be. And so I found that most people lead others the way they lead themselves. And if it doesn't work, then they come into this really easy conclusions about people. But it's very difficult to have those conclusions on self-reflection. Like, well, how is it that I'm leading people? What is it that I'm doing? So it starts creating this complex conversation around that self-reflection that is very powerful. I began to see that as I started being interested in what actually gets people to work together, then I started becoming a lot more effective, not just for myself, not just for my vision that I have for life or for my business, but also for my clients, for the people I support, how to get people to work together. So I wanted to create that real big context. Now, the thing I wanted to bring about before we get maybe some questions going, is that the way, in case you're asking, the way in which you begin to create a culture around you, I want to bring that word, a culture around you of high performance, is by having people be engaged in the future that you're creating, in the creation of the future, in the shaping of the future. I've started to realize, right, and this realization didn't come with my wisdom, my infinite wisdom. No, it came from a lot of training from a lot of people, right, from investing a lot of money on myself and on leadership development. And so I started to realize is that if I engage the people around me on the future, on the opportunity of the future that I want to create, now they have something at stake. Now they also have an opportunity to see that they're up to something bigger than themselves. And that creates an organic, in some way, thought-provoking environment for the opportunity of that outcome. Now, there are more things to say about more strategies to align people, more conversations to align people, but I wanted to start the conversation there, Corina, and then maybe engage with some questions, or I can keep going.
Great. Giovanni, I just want to, first of all, thank you for sharing your story of coming here with love and going through the life that you've had and where you've seen your leadership, your own personal leadership development go, and how you see your leadership and interacting with others, as a very brief recap, right, of things that I really noticed in your speaking. And my question for you, before we open it up to the rest of the audience, is what was it in your sharing what your, I'll just say big vision, right? What was it that you had that you were able to see shift in you sharing what your big vision was with other people and maybe getting interested in their vision aligned is what it sounded like, right? And what kind of, how did those conversations go and how did you see the results shifting as opposed to people are stupid and they're not with me and all of that? Like, what kind of results did you produce and how did those conversations go for the people that you were working with?
Yeah, I got very inspired by the movies, Corina, by
Yeah.
the movies that inspire people. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I started noticing that legacy and purpose they all begin with a thought, and they all begin with people not wanting to give up. It didn't, the big legacy that I see that other people leave in the marketplace or in the world, it starts with an idea, and it doesn't start with geniuses creating things. They start with people committed to something and sharing it with others. And then I love those journeys and that story of how people get things happen, they make things happen, and they didn't know when by the time they actually had that outcome realized, they could have never guessed, they could have never predicted all the avenues on how that happened. And so I became very optimistic and very romantic about life and about what's possible. And that's how it started for me, right? Just being optimistic and romantic about a view I had about having people, like work together, about having the world being able to connect in a way that more freedom is available. Freedom is available, not more freedom, but freedom is available. Self-expression is available. Creativity is available. All of those things I really connected to right from the beginning. So those are kind of the conversations that gave me some inspiration. And then afterwards, it was about money. Money was a conversation that really started helping me be effective. Because I started noticing that the people who create value in the marketplace usually get paid very well. And then I started noticing that the amount of money I have in my savings account has something to do with the value I'm creating in the marketplace. And so I started being okay with, it was something I allowed myself, I gave myself permission to being okay with providing services in the marketplace, having an exchange, and measuring my effectiveness around it. And so then that journey also started happening. And so that's a soup I'm just throwing at you, but that was kind of like where your question led me.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And something that really, and thank you, Giovanni, that was beautifully, you're such a beautiful speaker. And I was struck when you said the movies, and I was curious if you meant like in the cinema or like the movies that run for people about how their life is gonna go.
No, the movies like the cinema.
Cinema. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I was when I was little, it was in Colombia. I was 4, 5, 6 years old, and I would see the movies coming from Hollywood, right? And I love that story around the movie, and I love the actual real movies, like life stories on how they evolved. And so they made me kind of hopeful and romantic. I knew that maybe if I do something, if I could work hard, I could make a difference.
Yeah.
And that was the thing for me, making a difference. I wanted to make a difference. As I became an adult, the avenue I chose to make a difference was on leadership development, was on shifting the way people think about themselves and the way that they think about others. And that was the avenue I chose.
Fabulous. So Giovanni, in reflection of everything that you've shared in the movies, the cinema movies, and in starting what it sounds like new conversations with the people that you're working with, right? A new way of you looking at where you are, of how your interactions are with other people. And would you please share with us and our live and studio audience, would you share with us something that you would say was the win that you're most proud of, whether it's in contribution or in business or even in, like there's so much that's going on in the world right now, and I know that you're really committed to people having a great life. And I would even say, like what would you say is your biggest win that you're most proud of that comes to mind?
Can you say the question again? I got confused with the beginning of the question and then at the end of the question.
That's fine. It was a long question. So what is something like when you reflect on all of these shifts and changes that you were able to see for yourself, right? Inside of your leadership with others. So you've got these interactions happening fresh, new. What's something moving from that point forward that you're most proud of? Something that happened, an aha for an organization you worked with, or something that you created, or people that you served and contributed to, something in that realm.
Yeah. So I maybe I'm going to answer your question, but this is what's coming up for me.
Yeah.
So there are certain moments that shifted the rest of my life. And what I mean by shifting the rest of my life is there are moments where my opinion of myself shifted. There are moments like that. I'm going to talk about that. And then there are moments when my opinion of others shifted. And by having those shifts, my life was never the same way again. So when I grew up, as I was growing up, I developed this internal story about myself that I'm not smart, that I'm really, really, really dumb, you know? And no one really created that story for me. I just collected it because I had such a difficult time learning how to read and getting good grades and all of that stuff. So I took that story on. I'm just not smart. And so everything I was doing up until I was in college was around not being smart. It was just about getting by. Something that a human being will do if he or she wasn't smart. And then I found this quote from Albert Einstein. And the quote from Albert Einstein, I'm paraphrasing, it will be something about, I'm not a genius, I'm just really have a passion for curiosity. And that really did it for me. I became really passionate about being curious. And so I no longer needed to be smart. I no longer needed to be strategic. I no longer needed to show somebody else that I was effective. I could just be curious. And curiosity created outcomes for me that I never thought were possible for me, like graduating, like writing the book, like going to different countries, like consulting. All of that has been around the context of curiosity. And then the other one that really shifted for me about leading others was another moment where I realized that the way I see others, I build others. And so that was really critical. That was radical for me. And I saw that actually being done to myself. And one of the two people actually who were on this call or are on this call that made that kind of a shift for me the rest of my life was actually Rita Williams, who just signed in, and Sorrel. There was a way in which they spoke to me that it was greater that I ever saw myself. Mm-hmm. Challenging notions about what's possible for me, greater than I could ever see it for myself. And somehow, quite by accident, I can't quite take credit for it, but somehow I took on what they were seeing for myself. I took it on, and that elevated the rest of the opportunity of the rest of my life. So I became this really passionate human being about staying curious and about seeing others way bigger than they could possibly see themselves, because that was the key to my effectiveness. Those two things were the key to my effectiveness. Everything else has been a strategy, and I've gotten very good at becoming a strategist, and I love talking about strategies, but those are the two key moments that elevated things for me.
Wonderful, wonderful, and perfect timing that we had Rita join us right at that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to open it up to the audience just a little in just a couple minutes. So if you're starting to brew up questions, we'll invite you to raise your hand and ask a question in just a minute. And I wanted to just, before we do open all of that up, I wanted to just acknowledge, who you are, Giovanni, as someone who came to this country, started out handing out newspapers in the streets, and have brought yourself to the point that you are right now. And, we can't ignore everything that's happening in the world at the moment. Massive uprisings, massive, huge conversations, right? Beyond what got started in the civil rights, but maybe flashback to the civil rights movement. So with acknowledging what's happening in the world right now and who you are and as an individual, what would you like to share with our people, especially on social media or even in our audience? As I look through the names, I see an incredibly diversified crowd. I would love if you would take yourselves put yourselves on video so we can really see who you are. But is there anything that you'd like to say, Giovanni, to who you are, the life that you have chosen, and what you see possible out of everything that's happening right now?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk about that. It's very real, very relevant. It's happening now, right? My life's purpose is about the conversation that's happening right now. My whole life, for many years now, and for the rest of my life, is about making a difference to what's not working in the way that we communicate with each other. And so there is an aspect of relating and relatedness, the way human beings relate to one another, that needs, in some way, I'm going to say it this way, it needs a lot of training. It needs a lot of conversations, but not any kind of conversations. Not like I'm just going to talk about the way Karina should be and the way other people should be. No, I'm going to talk about what I haven't been trained in order to listen to another human being. What's in the way, what's in my way, in my own humanity, for me to listen. And that kind of speaking and that kind of training and that kind of listening, I have found to be very effective in making a difference to what we're dealing with. You know, I'll give you, I kind of give you an example. As you were sharing my story a little bit, and I moved to the US and I was selling newspapers, and I started in a neighborhood that was, you know, just a very, what do they call it? A neighborhood that's not developed, if you will, here in Atlanta. And so my community was a very poor community, and it was comprised of people from Mexico and people from China and all kinds of people from African Americans. And so it was kind of a class, a lower level class, which we were for each other. We were for each other, but we had a view, and the view was that the world was against us. Mm-hmm. Now, you couldn't tell me at the time that that was not true. You couldn't tell me at the time that I was making that up, because I had collected so much evidence, right, about my view that the world was against me, that the middle class didn't care, and the higher class, of course, they didn't care. So there was a kind of a transformation that I went through in being trained to start listening to my own filters and taking responsibility for my own filters. Now, that took some time for me to be responsible for my own filters, you know?
Yeah.
However, as I began to see that people, human beings, listen through filters, and I started taking responsibility for my filters, it allowed me to become a citizen of the world rather than a guy from Colombia who's defending his points of view. And that was, you know, that was really radical. So my life's purpose is to be able to give people those kind of tools. The tools to start noticing their filters, taking responsibility for their filters, and then taking responsibility for the way to speak in a manner in which I am not diminishing others, in a manner in which I'm understanding others, understanding other people's pains. However, I'm building a new conversation around filters, around personal responsibility. So that's how I want to start the conversation.
Okay. Really, really great, Giovanni. I so appreciate that we have this dialogue today. And anything further before I open it up to questions? And those of you that would like to ask questions, if you could just go to participants and raise your hand, and I'll call on you. It can be either questions or comments. There we go. Sorrel, we'll start with you.
Hi, Karina. Thank you for creating this forum. And Giovanni, thank you for being on and sharing with us. I have, this question's burning, right? Given what you just created, if you were speaking directly to our president, or perhaps the governor of the state of Georgia, what coaching would you give them?
That's a very big question, Sorrel, and you couldn't start with something. And let's just make it a little controversial too. Let's bring Trump into the conversation.
You know, Giovanni, who you are for me is, you know,
it's like that.
And I asked a question with this kind of humility. What you're about to say will transform the course of what's happening in the world.
Yeah, Sorel, thank you for the opportunity of bringing that on, right? It's a very mouthful, Sorel. I'm going to address it right on point, and I don't want to just say anything, right? Sorel, what if I had the opportunity to talk to the governor of Georgia, right? There is discovering first, or even Donald Trump, if that opportunity happens, right? There is discovering what is that person committed to first. I need to discover that, right? Because I don't want to come from a reaction like, oh, this is what you should do based on what I think you should do, right? I need to discover what is their ultimate commitment. What's that big commitment, right? And I would get everything out of their head, everything. Well, I'm committed to this, I'm committed to this, I'm committed to this, I'm committed to that, until that person no longer had noise in their head about defending who they are, but actually their commitments outside of their head. Having said that, right, once that really hard work happens, then we will look at, well, what is the best way that you can get a team around it on that commitment, not on defending a point of view, right? Because there's a difference between defending a point of view and what I'm committed to. And that, if people can separate that, like if the governor could separate that, if actually the president could separate that, if they could separate the commitment that they have and the point of view they're defending, all of a sudden there is a kind of clarity in actually unifying people. There's a kind of clarity in how to create a strategy for implementation that's not available when I'm really trying to defend my point of view. Does that make sense, Sorel?
Yeah, that makes sense. And if I may take words out of your mouth and put them in my mouth, uh, one could say, I could say to the governor of Georgia, uh, there's no need to defend your point of view. Your commitment gets clouded by that.
Yes, absolutely. That's beautiful how you said it. The hard work around that, Sorel, and for all of us on the call, is that my point of view is clouded. My commitments are not just clouded from my point of view, but they're also clouded by the emotions I have around my point of view. And so usually people are constantly, right? You and I are always reacting on the emotions I have around my point of view. So when I work with someone who's committed up to something, I get them to have a clarity about their commitment and an easiness, a kind of like freedom around their emotions, around their point of view. And when that happens, people do unbelievable things, incredible things for a greater good. And so that would spark the conversation, and that would spark teams and leadership and effective leadership that includes people,
Thank you, Giovanni. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, Sorel. Thank you for the big question.
Yeah, and thank you. And how listening really could make a difference, right? And how people's point of views, they get clouded, right? So thank you, Sorel, for bringing that question in, and Giovanni, thank you for answering so eloquently. Let's see, it looks like we have a question from Thomas, and anyone else that has a question, either in our live audience here in the studio or on Facebook Live, feel free to raise your hand or type that in. And Thomas, go ahead, you've got a question.
Yes, I have first of all, a statement, and then I have a question on how to get there. I purposely choose to make that difference, whatever that is for the individual. To be a committed listener and be a catalyst to the change that I want to be open for and to bring it into reality. How would I approach another individual or create the allowance and the space of them being that same when it's in a hostile environment?
Yeah, Thomas, the question, it was very abstract, so it's difficult for me to not answer in a very abstract way, Thomas. Do you want to make it a little bit more home? You want to bring that question home a little bit, or you want me to just answer the way I heard it?
Okay, let me just kind of clarify it a little bit. When given that I want to foster change in reality that's better for all people, but yet I'm facing a hostile listener or a hostile individual, and I want to still be a committed listener and get where they are. How do I change that and yet take the hostility away?
Oh yeah.
Diffuse it in a sense.
Yeah, I got that. You know, not very different from what I was sharing with Sorel. I get hostile conversations almost every day or every other day, right, Thomas? That's kind of like my world. And the way in which I create the conversation is that I'm not listening for the conversation as hostile. I'm just listening for the person's commitment. Like anywhere when you're talking to someone, they're actually speaking some kind of commitment. So in my ability to not diminish their commitment, but actually listen for what they are caring about, they give me a space. It creates a space for me to share what I care about. Now, depending on that person's journey, that can happen quickly, or that could take a lot more time.
Yeah.
But that's how I do it. Before this call, I was on a call with somebody else who said something that I felt was not responsible. But I didn't make it wrong. I didn't go into making it wrong. I just said the same thing he said. And then I said, but I feel that the domino effect of what you're saying might be counterproductive to what you want. And I didn't say it in a way I made them wrong. It was a curiosity. I created curiosity around it. And the person said, well, I didn't really mean it that way. If I went to attack the person, all that I do is elevate the conversation, and it will be more of the same. I hope that kind of gives you some opening to what you were pointing to.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as, in a brief synopsis, develop a non-judgmental point of view and be a committed listener for what they're committed to, and address the commitment, and the hostility may possibly go away.
Yeah, there's a dance around that. Correct. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
There were actually helicopters flying over, so I sort of muted myself. So listen, we are getting ready to wrap up, and I want to give one final opportunity. If anyone had a burning question that you did not have an opportunity to get in, we have just another minute if you would like to get that question in. Otherwise, I will turn the floor back to you, Giovanni.
Very good.
Okay. All right. Well, Giovanni, what would you like to leave our live and our live on Facebook audience, as well as our live in the audience, are right here with us? What would you like to have your final words be left with them today?
Thank you, Karina. Well, I want to start first by thanking all of you for joining. I really appreciate the opportunity to reach you where you're at and have the opportunity to have this dialogue. And the conversation is one that I'm really passionate about. And maybe with what I would like all of us to live with is this aspect, this opportunity of being in this inquiry of what is in my way, what's in my way to actually listen to another human being. What's in my way to actually listen to another human being? Not whether you're listening, is to actually listen. And if you and I take on that inquiry, I think we'll make a better world. That's what I want to end up with, Karina.
Okay. Well, Giovanni, I can't even begin to share how the gratitude that I have for you being here with us today. It's been wonderful. Thank you for the inspiration that you are for me in my own life. Thank you for the inspiration that you are for so many people all over the world, for entrepreneurs, for business people from Latin America, from all over the world. And I just so appreciate who you are. And all of you in the audience, thank you so much for being here. And come back next week. We have a wonderful speaker, Mary, who will be with us. And thank you once again. Connect and create. Take care. Bless you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.